there. So as was said, my name is Iris Berman. I am a massage therapist. I was the founder of Educating Hands School of Massage and the owner of it until just a short little bit ago for 37 years. Let me just get a quick sense of the room here. I know that a lot of you are, some of you are licensed and some of you are PSAP, but I wanted to get a sense of how long you've been in the school business. So how many of you had a school for 5 years or less? Okay, a bunch of newbies. 5 to 10 years. 10 to 15 years. 15 to 20. Over 20. All right, we got a wide range of experience here. Okay, how many of you are from one-person schools? Okay, very small staff schools, like 1, 2, 3 people. Okay, what would be called medium schools, you with an actual staff. All right, and how many of you were in schools that have more than one campus? All right, quite a number, more than I thought. Okay. How many of you started your school? Okay, and let's see, we already had the licensed and accredited question there before, so I got that one. Now, this is a question I've not heard anybody say yes to yet, but I thought I'd ask the crowd. Does anybody have a standalone school, which means it's not associated with a studio, you're just a school of Pilates? Anybody have one of those? Okay, doesn't exist. Okay, at least not in this group. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about me. I got into the massage world way back in the Neanderthal days of 1976. And I say Neanderthal days because when I look at the equipment, a lot of things, face cradles weren't invented, answering machines weren't invented yet, okay? So I got personally licensed in that time frame. My school, yeah, okay, let me ask something here. How many of you, now, so many of you started your own schools. You're probably just like me. You were just somebody who knew what you were doing and knew you knew how to teach, because some people just have teaching in their blood. I mean, I could teach since I could talk. Poor things of anybody who had ran to me when I was a little kid teaching around. But how many of you just kind of said, I can do this and I have something to teach and I'm gonna, and anybody want to come and learn? How many of you started your schools that way? Okay, I can tell you I did. Mine started as a conversation with me and 2 friends, and we sat around and we said, you know, this state needs a new massage school. And at that time, there's maybe 5 schools in the state. And we decided that was a good idea. But one of the gentlemen who was in that conversation, he was already teaching at a school in Gainesville, and when he went back to Gainesville after our conversation, he found that his school was for sale. So he bought it. Okay, so that started that piece. A year later, the 3 of us that had been in the first conversation found ourselves together in Gainesville, and it was decided, the guy who had bought the school said, this is the time, go back to Miami. You can start your school. You'll be a branch of my school. I already got it figured out with Tallahassee. It's all handled. So we believed him. And we came back to Miami. We put out the word. 2 weeks later, we had 12 students, so we figured we were right. And we started our school. So our first school, there you go. That's the window of our first school. We didn't even call it a school. We called it Educating Hands, the Center for Sharing of Massage Skills, because we didn't have the nerve to call ourselves a school yet. We hadn't quite figured that out. And it was a little 500 square foot space in a little teeny strip mall of like 8 stores. 3 other stores were very like-minded. We had a natural fiber clothing store, an alternative bookstore, a raw food restaurant, and us. So that was kind of a cool little community. But within a year, we found out that we outgrew that little 500 square foot space, so we got this little house. It was a wonderful house and it felt so spacious. It had a double living room and a dining room and a big porch and a couple bedrooms, all enough space for us to have classrooms and offices and a clinic. I mean, we were really kind of getting there. So as we're sitting in that school, we started getting cease and desist letters. We've heard about that before. Turns out that little arrangement that guy in Gainesville had with Tallahassee wasn't much of an arrangement because they didn't buy it and they were looking at us to get legal. Okay, so we did what had to be done. Some of you, I know, went for the licensing because you got one of those cease and desist letters. However they got to you, either somebody ratted you out or somebody stumbled upon something, but somebody figured out you should have been under their guidelines and let you know that you should. So we sent off for the package, because it wasn't internet yet. We sent off for the package of what you needed to do to get licensed, and we spent a year trying to figure it out. Because let me back up for just a moment. That first year that we were teaching, and I'll bet most of you have this ideas, when you first started doing your first classes, you didn't have it all planned out. You didn't say, okay, between here and here, this is the beginning, this is the end, and here's all the steps in between. You just made it up. You went into class in the beginning, you went, okay, what am I going to, great, I'm going to do this today. Or I got this great idea, I'm going to do that this week. This is really cool, they're going to love it. And they probably did. And you did that, you created it as you went. Well, my first year in the school, I have to say, when I started the school I had a partner. We just believed in ourselves, and we believed in our skills, and we believed in our abilities to teach, but we did make it up as we went along. We had to teach every class together, actually, that first year, because he was all energy and I was kind of the concrete. So we needed to collectivize ourselves to become the whole. And it was great. We each taught a little piece of the part that we were going to do. By the end of that first year, we'd kind of absorbed the pieces that each of us needed from the other, and we started teaching some classes independently. But there we were, needing to face this piece of licensing. So as we sit there and look through all these things, we realized, wow, we got to have this thing really thought out. This is pretty cool. So we sat down and figured out an enrollment agreement and a catalog and a lesson plans, and I mean all these little things. Now our lesson plans were incredibly rudimentary then. We just said, okay, first month we'll get these things done, and the next, I mean, it was like very, very preliminary, if you will. But enough, because the state, as was stated before, the state is not looking at your program specific. They're looking at your business, your institution. So they more care about, do you have that enrollment agreement, and do you have that refund policy, and do you have those are the things they're looking at. So we spent a year putting that together, and for whatever reason we thought, let's take it to Tallahassee. So we went to Tallahassee, we walked into the office, and we announced ourselves. And there was a woman who looked up like the most hardened criminal had just come in to turn themselves in. Because, we had evaded them for a year, they'd been sending us these cease and desist letters. I mean, they must have known something since they sent us the package, but still, we were terrible people. Till about 10 minutes in, and they realized that we were not. And they changed. It was amazing. They gave us a desk. They even put us up overnight. They kept us for 2 days. They held our hands. Here's a better refund policy. Here, let me tell you this about your catalog. I was like, we knew that when we left and we handed in our package that it was a done deal, because they practically approved us as we were sitting there, I mean, they weren't the final approval, but we knew that we were going to satisfy. So in 1983, we got our license. Now we're official, we're real, we can say we're a school, and it was wonderful. We did do a lot of work for it, and it was an amazing transformation, just mentally saying, oh, that makes sense now. Look at this, we got this thing. It was pretty cool. Well, over the years, we grew a little bit. We spent 13 years in one location. Actually, this was one building after, it was incredible. We moved it 3,500 square feet. My God, it was like palatial estates. Until about 3 years later when it wasn't enough. So we added the building next door. But collectively, we were 13 years at that location. Then the people who owned those two buildings was selling the whole block and turning it into a strip mall, so we had to move. We moved a block away to that building where we were for 15 years. And then we moved to this one, and so now we were into 10,000 square feet. Fabulous. It was wonderful. So that was our progression. While we were in this progress, I started hungering to connect with other people who were as crazy as me as doing this thing called running a school. And I was a member of the American Massage Therapy Association, and I discovered that they had an approval process. So I said, all right, I'm going to get my school approved. Now, very much like the earlier PMA approval process, it was very simple. Yeah, it just had to, in our case, we had to be licensed, had to have 500 hours, I don't know, a couple other little criteria that were standards. They were good standards, but they weren't very complicated. It wasn't a very big event to get approved. But we did. We went and got approved, and then I discovered that there was a group of these approved schools that had formed something that they called the Council of Schools. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go check them out. So in 1985, I actually joined the Council of Schools. Now, I did it for a lot of reasons. I did it in one part to network, to connect with other people like me and find out, like, you know, what does make us this crazy. I did it to share. I wanted to learn from people, like, how did you do that? And how did you, you know, what, did you ever find that as a problem? And what did you do? So it was a lot of that. And during that same time, the membership organization, the AMTA, much like your PMA, had taken on a mission to try and take massage out of the shadows. I heard somebody say this earlier, where we're in the shadows with Pilates. You're right where we were then. We were in the shadows, under the radar. People didn't really know. If you said you did massage therapy, we say, "Well, that's cute. That's it. You know, that's interesting." I mean, it didn't have a reference of any value to that particularly. So the AMTA decided, we're going to get massage on the map here. We're going to make this be much more known. So they started a fabulous campaign of press releases and interviews, and got on television, on radio. We had ads and articles that appeared in Life magazine and Reader's Digest and Field and Stream and all kinds of unusual places, as well as the more classic ones. And the word was getting out there. We started seeing ourselves in plot lines of TV shows. You all remember Friends and Phoebe, the kind of addled massage therapist, but nonetheless, she was there, you know. And then there were like subplot lines where somebody would just have a massage therapist coming to work with them in the background of something else. But we started showing up. I mean, I remember in the early days when I'd go to an apartment house or a hotel and I'd ride up the elevator, someone would say, "What an unusual suitcase," which opened up the opportunity for me to say what a massage table was. Nowadays, you go in there, they go, "Oh, you got a card?" I mean, everybody knows what a massage table looks like today. Back then, nobody did. So it was, we were definitely in the shadows, and we started to come out of the shadows. Well, something happened around that time that we also realized, well, first of all, it kind of raised the consciousness of the country, of people. Even just, if I were to look at the progression in just the state of Florida, before I got licensed, they were licensing people for 37 years. My license number is 3,168. So that means there were 3,000 licenses in the first close to 40 years. I've been licensed for a little bit more than 40 years, and they're now giving out licenses of 88,000. So that means 3,000 in the first 40 and another 85,000 in the second 40. That speaks to the progression and expansion of massage. When I got into the field, you didn't see big signs that said massage on the corner of anywhere. Now you see it everywhere. I mean, every corner has a day spa, and every day spa offers massage. That didn't happen. There wasn't a massage envy possible back then. Nobody would have bought into it. So this was a real powerful progression of things. And one of the things that happened with the Council of Schools, oh, you can come down a whole bunch of those things here. There was the general effect was the power of sharing, because that's what made me want to do this. Is I wanted to share. I wanted to get what was happening, and what was found, which I'll talk about a little bit more, the details in a little bit, but it raised the quality of the schools. It raised the whole profession, and it became a driving force for anything that was coming afterwards. In fact, the Council of Schools had formed and become a strong voice for every aspect of the schooling, and most of us were small single-person businesses or small staff businesses, kind of like what's in this room here. That's kind of where we were. There were, at the time I joined it, I think there were 30 schools in it, maybe 40. When the time I left, there were 60 schools in that had been in this system. So it's not like there was thousands and thousands of schools. It was people who really took this seriously and really wanted to see standards and professionalism abound. We didn't know what that meant at the time. We were still just asking questions like, oh, what do you do? So we were still in very early stages. But what the Council of Schools had developed was a voice. We became the must consult group. If anybody wanted to do anything that represented development in the field, whether it was trying to encourage a state to license therapists that had not previously done so, or it was creating policies on a national level, they came to the Council of Schools to find out, what did we think? Could we implement it? Was it going to be a problem? What did we think? They wanted our opinion. That was a really important thing, and it was a very valuable piece for the profession. Because I'm going to say this many times, and you're going to hear this, you've already heard it at least once from somebody else, but educators are the leaders. We are the thought leaders, and we are the activators of the profession. And I will say more about that as time goes on, but that is the truth. So at the same time that the Council of Schools was doing this and the AMTA was doing their push, there were other energies that were happening around the same time. The editor of Massage Magazine, which was unaffiliated with any organization, it was just a massage magazine, he decided that, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize, I thought I had it on silent. Sorry about that. He decided that there was so much variety, so many factions in the field of massage, that we had Western theory and Eastern theory and deep tissue and energy and everything in between, that these different players ought to be talking to each other. They ought to be having a conversation where we can talk about what is happening in this field and where do we want it to go. And the whole process, they did very daring. Over a period of 2 years, there were 3 summits, these head, heart, and hand summits were held. And it did just what it meant to do. It brought all these people, Eastern, Western, polarity, reflexology, whatever it was, all these people were now in one place, all having a conversation. We're in this profession. What are we going to do about it? It was fabulous. Then out of the Council of Schools, this is a group of crazy players like that. I don't know if anybody can find me in there, but I'm in there somewhere. The group of us said, we need to find common language. Now, this is not an unheard of thing for you guys. You've already been through a couple of rounds of common language. I'm going to promote and suggest another round, but I can talk about that later. We put together, one of our schools had a grand association with Canyon Ranch, and so the guy from Canyon Ranch said, okay, I tell you what, I'm going to sponsor a group, you come over here, put you up for 4 days, you figure it out. So this group of 15 people went to Canyon Ranch for 4 days with the mandate of finding some kind of common terminology. How were we going to find words that encapsulated who we were in our various identities? Well, in order to do that, I mean, this was an amazing group. There were authors, there were school owners, directors, teachers, developers of modalities, teachers of modalities, educators, all of us in some fashion. And they were like the thought leaders of the time. So we got together, and the first thing we had to do was create criteria. What would qualify as a word that would be acceptable? So that was interesting. We had 6 criteria, but I'll only tell you 3 of them. That's, the big ones. It has to be acceptable and understandable by all the participants. So the people who were the practitioners had to think that was a good word, whatever that was. Some of the people of our profession didn't like to associate with the word massage. That wouldn't have been good enough. Or whatever little differentials that we had about ourselves. It had to be understandable and acceptable to the public. They had to know what it is that they were getting by virtue of using that language. It had to not fly in the face of state licensing. Because in those days, there was maybe 20, 25 states that were licensing massage therapists at that time. But a lot of them had varying laws, like some didn't let you use the word therapy, for instance. So that wouldn't have been a good word. So we had to come up with words that we could use. 4 days, 15 of the brightest minds, 6 criteria, we ended up with one word. And none of us liked that word. The one word was bodywork. And we all hated it because it reminded us of car repairs. And, but it was the one word that encapsulated everything and didn't injure anybody and didn't insult anybody. And it did all the things we needed it to do. It is now in our lexicon. I'm sure you've heard of it. You may not have realized that's where it got into the story, but that's how it got there. And we've embraced it and used it, and you guys could probably even fall under the category of it if you really wanted to push the model on that. But it was the thought, it was the process, it was the development of things. We realized that we were really in like a blank slate moment. You guys are at this moment right now. What we saw was that here we are. Nobody knows who we are. We can say whoever we want to say we are. We can design ourselves to our best image. And so we set out to do that because no one was there telling us, but we knew that we were starting to getting awareness. People were starting to pay attention to us. People were starting to say, I don't know who you are, but you shouldn't be doing that. I don't know who you are, but you're not going to play in my world, or whatever. We started getting these kind of little edges of that. So we realized that if we did not do something, if we did not take control over where we were going as a profession, someone else was going to do it. Someone was going to tell us you're going to work under our guidelines, or you're going to limit yourself to this, or you're not going to do that, and you can't do this, and we weren't going to take it. So we set out to do it differently. Now, one of the things that we found out as we were doing the exploration is we asked the question of, well, what makes a profession? What is a profession? So we discovered that there were 6 benchmarks that marked a mature profession, I would say, just put it to that. Because we discovered after we did this that we were really adolescents. But we decided that what made a mature profession were 6 things. One was membership organization. We went, great, we got that. We have the AMTA. You could say, great, we did that because you've got the PMA. Okay, you got that. We had an independent organization of schools. Wonderful, we actually have one of those. That was great. Now, you guys have the beginnings of that. And we'll talk, I'll take you to that in another slide or two, but you do have the beginnings, but we had that. But when we looked at the other things, we didn't have third-party accreditation, certification. We didn't have accreditation. We didn't have a research center, and we didn't have a federation of regulatory bodies. They just didn't exist. So we said, okay, we are just adolescents. We have 2 of the 6 things, and we better do something about it. So between the AMTA and the council schools, there were committees formed. There was a committee formed to look at third-party certification. Now, you guys have already gone through this, so you've already done this step. But we had to do the very same steps you did. We had to do what was called a job task analysis. We had to send out notices to everybody, and we took that Head, Heart, and Hands conference to heart because we used all of those players in there. It wasn't just the AMTA, even though they were spearheading it and funding it. They put out the survey to everybody so we could have the input from the varying factions that made up this field. And our goal was to look for, is there enough common information, common knowledge and skills that we all agree that are minimal to make a professional massage therapist? And we were fascinated to discover that there was, because we weren't sure what we'd get back. But there was an identified, very rich body of knowledge that everybody agreed one should know before they enter in and become a professional in this field. So that committee set out to take that on. And they did all the steps that you guys did with subject matter experts and psychometricians, and how do you write a test question, and how do you do this, and then let's get it evaluated, and let's, went through all of that. And what we ended up with was the National Certification Board for Massage Therapy and Bodywork, which had a certification test that had been vetted insanely, and was a very validated exam. We also had a group that said, research. We need to do research. We need to find out what research is out there. We need to kind of make research, whatever it is. So this committee set out to figure that out, and they created what became known at the beginning as the AMTA Foundation, and eventually spun off to be the Massage Therapy Foundation. The Council of Schools, on the other hand, was obviously the right seat for the committee for the development of the accrediting commission. I was on that committee. And we took 8 years of going through meticulously each other kinds of accrediting agencies that were out there, and what was their elements, and did we relate to them, and did they work for us, and let's create our own policies and our own standards and our own process. And we suspended, because remember we had that approval process, and we suspended all approvals, no more approvals. Anybody who was approved could still carry on that little title, but it really wasn't worth as much anymore because we were on another journey. So we suspended the whole approval process, and in 1989 we started to put our hearts and souls into making this happen. And we spent the next 8 years really developing the process, and we didn't do any accreditations until we had a finished product, until we were really an accrediting body. That's a little different than your process, because you actually have, by virtue of Ray's experience in this whole insanity, because he was on the sidelines while I was in the playing this craziness, so he got to hear all this and see all this, and he carried our school through the first 3 accreditation processes that we went through, the initial one and a couple renewals. And that was, so he brought that wisdom to bear while you guys created your PSA, so you have an awful lot of accreditation already in place, just to let you know. So, we started the process then. We started out as a group called PARC and SARC, because we were to do the Program Approval Revision Committee. There was a program approval, but we were going to revise it. Now remember that the Asian people were of a different ilk. They had come to the AMTA at some point to say, we want to be an approved school too, back when there were still approvals, and that's when we realized we don't have any policies or anything relative that would fit for a shiatsu school, because they had a whole different philosophical foundation based on the one that we had, which was more that Western Swedish model. This was a very different model, and we didn't have anything that would help us to do that. So we realized that we needed to revise that too. So this committee was tasked with revising the program approval and seeing if they could bring in these other players in the field. And the process of doing that, we developed something we call the initial calling that when we first started to do any kind of approval accreditations, was we called ourselves COMTEL with 2 A's, which allowed for approval and accreditation, which we eventually dropped that, and we just became the Commission on Massage Therapy Accreditation. And we accredited our first school in 1997. So the Council of Schools at that point was comprised of all the approved schools and anybody who was in process or already gone through the accreditation. What did that do for us? It gave us credibility as schools, because now we were making a standard that was much more involved and much more definitive as to the value of what we were offering. It gave comfort to people who would ask, is your school accredited? Now, somebody mentioned before the parents of students. Sometimes those were the ones who were asking that question because it was their money and they wanted to make sure it was going to the best place. But I also had a lot of the students themselves, and of course we had a lot of adult students. They weren't coming in with their parents. But it really did give a sense that there is a quality control, that somebody else looked at and said, you got quality. So third-party certification is basically what that is. It's a third-party acknowledgement. Somebody who's not you saying, you're pretty good. And you're pretty good based on this standard. And the standard was a high, was highly respected standard. So that was good. And so this whole thing raised the bar for everybody. It didn't just raise the bar for the schools that went through the process. Even the schools that didn't go through the process had a different looking at it. The public looked at them differently. The public looked at the profession as something more valuable and more valid and more acceptable. And so as it grew in the consciousness of the community that massage was not just an indulgence, it was not just a thing you did after you kind of overly worked out and went and got Hulga beat you up or something at the end of it. It was coming out of the shadows into something much more real and much more tangible. So it even addressed the things of the small schools, because that was one of the big things that happened in the whole process, is the small schools said, don't, I mean, what Ray, I think, was saying something about small schools are afraid they're going to get run out of Dodge once you start doing standards. And small schools had the same issues when the massage was trying to move its standards up. Oh, you're going to kill the small schools? Well, we can't do it. That's not a true statement. And I'll tell you all about that. Okay. So this was an interesting thing. For years, we were the council schools, and we were all strong, and we had this fabulous voice, and everybody came to us for opinions, and it was really wonderful. And we were, independent players to begin with, so we didn't ask permission for anything. We just said, okay, we're opening a bank account, you're the president, okay, whatever. We did everything all by ourselves. We made position statements, and we wrote articles. We did everything. And then one day, somebody from the AMTA decided that, wait a minute, you're doing all that stuff and it reflects back to us, and we don't always agree with everything you say. We need to take another look at this relationship. And they gave us an ultimatum. We had to go more independent or become more ensconced under their aegis. And for whatever reason, the leadership at that time decided to get more ensconced. But it didn't take but a little bit of time to figure out that was not a good move. Because once we did that, we didn't have the freedom to make independent postures. We didn't have the ability to make a stand. We lost our voice, is what happened. So very soon after that, we went, all right, we need a different arrangement. Now, I'm going to speak about a certain arrangement that I think is valuable for you guys to hear about, because I think it's a kind of arrangement that, as these side entities emerge, that you might want to consider. And it was called an independent affiliate. So the certification body, the National Certification Board for Massage Therapy and Bodywork, and the foundation, when they were both created, they were created as independent affiliates. And what that meant was that the AMTA gave office space for it, even a personnel. People could call that phone number and get information, and they gave all kinds of administrative support. But they had no voice in the actions taken by that group. So the AMTA could not tell the certification board what to do, how to do, when to do, what to do. And neither could they tell that to the foundation. It was an independent affiliate. Whereas the council schools had never declared that, and we, for whatever reason, didn't choose to declare that at the time we had the opportunity. So we decided that we were going to ask for that now. Okay, let's shift gears. We're going to become an independent affiliate. And there was a small committee, and of course I was on it, and there was a small committee that was to be the stewards of that transition. Well, when the AMTA went back to their board to have a conversation about their side of that story, they went, oh, nah, let's just kill them. So they took all of the elements that had been within their bylaws that allowed for and supported the council schools and eliminated them. So here we were, this little body of people who used to play together, and a group of 5 people who were this committee for transition. We felt like we were on an iceberg in the middle of the ocean. And it's like, okay, now what? We aren't anybody, we aren't anything, what are we going to do? So the 5 of us, being educators, and remember, educators are the leaders. They are the thought leaders and the innovators, and they take things going, and so the 5 of us said, let's put on a show. And we set out to talk to all the people we knew and anybody they knew, and we said, let's do this organization. Let's create, we need to be here, it's a voice we need to have, let's create it. So out of whole cloth, we created the Alliance for Massage Therapy Education. Now, we did a couple other things with that group, which was kind of cool, because up until then, the Council of Schools had just been school directors and owners, because that's who was approved. The school was approved. But what we figured when we went to go into this separate thing, we said, you know what? The Alliance should be for all of education. So we created a subset within the, 3 subsets within the organization. One was for the school owners and directors. The other one was for the faculty of schools, so that the faculty had a forum to exchange what's it like to teach science, or how do I present this subject area, or is anybody running into difficulty with whatever, little forum. And then we also said there's continuing education, and those people have no forum to exchange information and to talk about how do we market better, or how do we organize better, or what makes the most sense, what's the balance of whatever the concerns are of people who are teaching continuing education. So we created a separate arm of that. So the AFMTE has 3 sets of memberships. You can be a school member, a faculty member, or a CE member. And each one of those has a little, separate interface, this chat room type of energy, where they get to talk to each other throughout the year and at our bi-yearly conferences. So that was a very important thing. But it shows that clear thinking and determination can make anything happen. So you guys, you are the leaders here. And you are the big thinkers, the thinkers in front of the line. Where do you want it to go? You are at blank slate territory. What do you want to fill that blank slate with? So I really am here to encourage you to really do it. I served on this board for the first 5 years of this new group, and I helped to steer where it is today, and it's been marvelous to do that, and it really makes a difference. We also found ourselves being able to reach out and be representative to larger bodies that are not necessarily limited to massage therapy. One that you might even find yourself involved in is one's called ACAC, the Academic Consortium for Complementary and Alternative Healthcare. That's a group of people that have all different kinds of healthcare interests represented, and so there is a place where those people get to say, there's a bigger field called healthcare. What role do you play? What role do you play? How do we make this work together? It's a brilliant organization. There's another one that I don't know a lot about, but we do have a representative that goes to that, called the Federation of Therapeutic Massage, Bodywork, and Somatic Practices Organization. So that's an organization of organizations. So it's okay, because these organizations, if we are part of a larger universe, we need to talk to each other, rather than, kind of play in our own little territory and hope that everything works out for us. We have the opportunity to engage in our own world and in the world beyond us to make an influence of who we are in the game, how do we want to be, and what do we want to be. So, as I move into some of the things that are relative with moving it more into the conversation about Pilates, let's talk about some terminology. Now, you saw this list, some of this list in your booklet. So, while we had the Council of Schools, which now is called the AFMTE, you have the Summit Development Committee. Now, notice it's a word that says committee. Okay, so you don't quite have a council of schools yet. You have a self-selected group of people who serve as representative of schools, and they do serve you well. I mean, look at this conference. This is amazing. And they've done a really good job, and they take it very seriously. But I want to suggest that you guys actually form a council of schools. Get more formalized. Every one of you should be a member of it. And you should talk about to everybody else that you know that runs schools, and they should become a member of it. Because one of the biggest things that made a difference in the world of massage was when the Council of Schools used its voice. And we used our voice because we knew that we needed to be really powerful, and we had a voice, we had something to say, we had influences to make, and we used that. So I really want to say that's a very big and important step to take, and so I want to encourage you guys to, in your little conversations over lunch and dinner and wherever, start talking about, can we put on that show? Really think about it. I think it's an important one. So we have the Commission on Massage Therapy Accreditation. You have about 2/3 to 3/4 of that in your PSAP, thanks to Ray's wisdom and intention that he brought to the game, and how you and how the players that came and worked with him to establish the standards that you've established. It's wonderful. You've got only a couple of steps to go before you would qualify for actual accreditation. So you're not far along. So if you, not far away, if you feel that this is a measure that you guys want to take, it'll be an easier step. It won't take you 8 years, let's put it that way. You've already done a lot of that work. We have the AMTA, the American Massage Therapy Association, and you have the PMA, the Pilates Method Alliance. We have the NCB-TMB, and you have the Pilates Certification Program. We have the Massage Therapy Foundation, and you have the beginnings of such a thing called your research committee, which could, on their own, start to say, let's get serious and make this be more real. It's a step you could take. It may not be immediate. It may not be this week or next week, but it's something to think about. It's a seed that you have. And then there are what we do, or who we are, the people. So the frontline players in massage are called practitioners or therapists. The frontline people in Pilates are called Pilates teachers. They're the ones that actually take the public through the programs of the Pilates work. And who teaches those people? There's massage teachers, and then there's Pilates teacher trainers. And where do you work? In massage, we work in a practice of some sort, either a house call practice where we carry the skills to you wherever you are and provide those skills to you, or we work in an office, which is either somebody's little small personal office, or an office with other people, or an office in a larger business, in a beauty shop, in a health club, in a doctor's office, hospital. There's lots of places where there are massage practices. Pilates, for the most part, you're in studios, because for most of you, you're going to use equipment, and that limits you to a particular space. But I do know a number of Pilates practitioners, Pilates teachers, whatever you want to call them. See, this is why you need language conversation. That's a whole, yeah, I'll go there. But I do know a number of Pilates people who go to people's homes and work with them, either doing, I guess, mat work or use of props or something like that, but that you do personal, on-site type of activity with people. And where do you learn to do those things? In massage, you go to a massage school. And in Pilates, you go to a Pilates school. And I know that some of you haven't quite called yourself schools yet, but I'm encouraging you to do so, because that's what you got. You may have an educational offering of all kinds of sorts, but if you've organized it into a package that's sellable to somebody, you've got a school. Okay, so you've got a few existing things that already serve you well, and one of them is the Pilates Method Alliance. I don't know how long the organization's been around. 12 years, more? How long has it been? 15? 18. Whoa, okay, you've been around, this is good. Okay, so the Pilates Method Alliance is committed to a lot of things. They got outlined earlier before that were wonderful set of commitments that they have to you as educators and to the Pilates world as a whole. But just focusing on education, what are the kinds of things that Pilates really commits to for you guys? They do agree and take and treat you guys as the educators are the front line. The educators really do develop the next layer, the next wave of people that are going to be doing this work. So they're very much behind that. They also are very much behind standards, and they believe very strongly that schools support and promote and represent standards. And if you were going to be creating the next wave of people, you want those people to meet a decent standard. So you start with having standards in your own school that you then transfer to the people that you're training. So you have that already begun with the PSAP. That's a really wonderful program that you have. And I'll reiterate, it's about 3/4 of the way through to accreditation, so you're not far off if you want it. But the PMA also supports regulation, which in the realm of schools is vocational education. And I know that I can say that, but just having been through the massage world about that, there's a lot of acceptance and excitement, and then there's a lot of resistance and negativity about taking on that role of officially declaring yourself a school and a vocational school and becoming licensed in the states. Because as you noticed at that map, there's only like 2 or 3 states that don't require or don't have vocational education licensing. Everyone else does. You just first have to recognize that you are that. We'll talk about that in a minute too. But at any rate, the PMA really supports the full standardization and professionalization of the education arm of the Pilates world. In line with that, you have the PSAP. There is, that basically is your minimum standards for being a school. You spent some time, I've noticed in the history of your previous conferences, how much time and attention has been put into creating the elements that make the PSAP, creating an agreed upon terminology and creating agreed upon standards, and really looking at this. You've done some marvelous work so far. It's been an incredible thing to observe just from the outside, seeing how far you've actually come. And you've done an interesting thing in that with massage, we didn't accredit our first school till we had an accrediting system in place. You guys are doing it a different way, which I kind of like. I wish we'd thought about this. You've got some standards and you're starting to apply those standards right now. So schools come in under those standards as they exist, and we'll see how you do, but you may keep evolving that until you do those last 2 or 3 or 4 steps that would be necessary to complete this thing called accreditation. But you've got schools that are saying, yeah, I want to be recognized for living up to standards, and you're doing it. How many of you are in process of the PSAP? Good show. All right. So I know that there's about 50 schools that are kind of somewhere along the path to getting the PSAP. That's marvelous. You guys are going to make, there's going to be like tipping point that you reach that's going to say this is the time to look at the next step. You're not there yet, but if all those 50 do it, you might be at that point. So that's a wonderful set of steps that you're taking. So there is, from what I've heard, amazing and wonderful organizational support. For those of you who are in it, you probably already know this because you've probably had questions to ask. You probably called Ray or Orion or somebody at the PMA to ask. So they will hold your hand. From what I can gather, if you have any questions, how to fill something out, what does this mean, what do I do, what's the order of things, they will help you. So if you are in a school that is still contemplating, should I, dare to do, because you will be assisted along the way. Much like that moment when I went to Tallahassee and those guys opened their office and let me be there for 2 days and held my hand through it. This is a gift. So you've got a gift in the PMA and in the PSAP staff that will really assist you in the process, and I really want to encourage you to take that step. And then, and like I said, it is like 3/4 of the way to accreditation. So what does it take, though? I mean, the PMA and all the efforts of the PSAP, you've created the standards for teachers and for schools. And, but what does it take to join the movement? What does it take to become an approved school? It takes foresight, it takes courage, and it takes the willingness to share. And I say that because as some of you are contemplating it, or you've heard other people who are contemplating it or rejecting it right off the bat, there are concerns when you start to say, I'm going to stem out of the shadows, I'm going to stand for standards, and I'm going to show you that I got what it takes. That is a pretty big step, and some of it's pretty darn scary. So the concerns that are relative to taking this leap of faith, they're all about fears. Fundamentally, they're fears. One of them is the fear of sharing. If I were to share who I am and what I am, you might judge me. You might accept me. Some people are as afraid of acceptance they are as rejection. But you're afraid of that. That is a fear. You're afraid of revealing your secrets. I'll tell you later about what secrets mean, but at any rate, you're often afraid of rules. You don't want to feel like you have to fall into some little box and you feel like you're going to lose your individuality, or you feel like you lose the spirit or the soul of your school because you're conforming to some standard. That's common fear. I don't know how reasonable it is, but it's a common fear. Fear of costs. That's a very reasonable one, because it does cost. It costs money to go through licensure. It costs money to go through approval. It costs money, but it costs more than money. It takes time. It takes thought. It takes commitment. And you got to be willing to put that cost into the play. I will say once and several other times that it's really, really worth the cost. Fear of approvals, of that cost about the approvals, and fear that sometimes if you go through this process, you're actually going to have to hire somebody else. So now you've got a cost factor that increases your bottom line altogether. That's a possibility, but you got to look at that. Now there's fear of organizational power. I can just imagine some of the conversations. Oh my God, the PMA, they're going to tell me what to do, how to do, but I can't take it, you can't tell me that. There's probably some people you've heard, or you've been one of those people who've said that very thing. Then there is fear of losing your territory, or not standing up to your competition, or losing your programmatic integrity, or a fear of exposing what you consider your proprietary information. So the Council of Schools saw that. We were very much aware of that. We acknowledged those fears. We faced those fears, and we chose collectively to overcome those fears. So how did we do that? It starts with sharing. Now, I entered into that particular group, the Council of Schools. It was about a year and a half after they started. So I came in really in the early stages, and the first things that was like, we're sharing, okay, that was a big thing. So, okay, everybody, bring your forms the next time, let's share those, and we'd lay them all out on tables, bring this one. I mean, it was very scary, and we were all, kind of very cautious and reticent to play this game, but we were also willing to play this game. So what do you share after all? You're going to share information. Stuff that you think you care about, but then when you do, you realize you don't really care about it. Your pay scales. Does it really matter if you pay $20 or $25 an hour for your teacher? I mean, really? So you say, well, that area has, needs to do that, or this, whatever. You kind of put it in perspective. You share hiring practices. You share forms. You share all kinds of things that you do. Now, this week, you're going to be doing a lot of looking at the kind of sharing that goes on with what makes an enrollment agreement, what makes a refund policy, what makes a catalog. And you're going to be seeing examples from other people. That's called sharing. You may have your own that you brought with you to go to that particular class to kind of see how does yours live up to anybody else's, or whoever is put forth as a standard. And you see, okay, I need to fix this or add that, or boy, I got that in there, it doesn't even need to be there, okay. Or whatever you discover about your own process. But you're going to share these things. And and you're going to share marketing ideas. Did you have a question? Okay. Marketing ideas, it's not a big deal if 6 schools in an area market to the same avenue. Because if you do it and you do it right, you're expressing in your promotion what makes you stand out, what makes you different, what makes you is you. And then it really helps you to get more appropriate students, because the people that are going to respond to what you said about yourself as opposed to what somebody else says about themselves, they're going to say, that's who I want to go study with, that's the person I want to learn from. That's the school I want to go to. Comparison does not make it be a bad thing. Comparison actually helps matters. You have less nonsensical conversations with people who aren't really suited to your program because you have to go through the conversation to find that out. Well, they already found that out because they looked at your description and went, that's not for me. Oh, that one is for me. I'm going there. So you start to find more appropriate responses. So marketing ideas to share is not a bad thing. And in today's age of internet, you can be in any part of the world and be next to whoever you think is your competition. People will travel if they feel that a program is significantly valuable enough. I have people who come from other countries, in class right now, I have somebody from New York and somebody from Washington State and somebody from somewhere else in the Midwest. Right now, they came specifically because, for whatever reason, my school spoke to them. So you're going to find that's the case. So don't fear sharing marketing ideas. Organizational structure. So this is where smaller schools really have a lot of what to say. That's just me. What do I need all this detail for? I'm going to tell you why. Even though you're a one-man show, even though your name will appear under every single structural job that you identify in your system, it's a good idea to define that, to kind of create yourself a picture that says, yeah, okay, I'm the chief cook and bottle washer. I'm the admissions person, and I'm the program director, and I'm the teacher, and I'm the administrator, and I'm the accountant, and I'm the whatever. You're being all the things, right? If you do that, even if your name appears under every one of those jobs, at some point in time you might say, oh, I'm over this one. Let me see. I'm going to hire somebody to do that job. You've already got that figured out. You don't have to worry about it. And trust me, if you're going to go through licensing and accreditation, they're going to ask you for an organizational chart. And it doesn't matter to them if your name appears under every part of it. It's really okay. They just want to know that you've thought that this area is an area of importance. This is an area of consideration. This is a job. So they want to know that you've thought that out and incorporated that in your system. So even if you're a one-man show, go to the trouble of figuring out organizational structure. It will serve you in the long run. And the hardest thing of all, to share. The absolute place where if you do have a secret, that's where it lives, is in your curriculum. And so that's like the last thing we went through all kinds of, I'll spread out all these things. Okay, let's share all these forms. Let's share all these concepts. When it came down to curriculum, we were like, okay, what do we share? It was definitely a challenging spot to do, but it was still worthy. We discovered that it doesn't matter that different people have different styles of curriculum development. It was pretty okay to discover that somebody did it very differently than you did. That was not a big deal. In fact, it was quite interesting. There's so many variations on the theme. It was pretty cool to see how many variations there are on a theme. And sometimes you're stimulated to say, that's interesting. Mind if I borrow that? And most people don't mind, unless it is really your secret sauce, whatever that might be. But you usually don't share that till the absolute very end, till you're twisted sideways to do that. But it is important to realize that there's power in sharing. Do the next one. Okay, secrets are not so secret, guys. What we really discovered when we went to dare to share some of what we thought was our secrets is that they really were all about a shared foundation. Even though in massage was much more intensified than it is going to be for you guys, because we had such varied foundations, east, west, deep, energy, whatever, all those things were very different. And so we realized that still, even with those differences, fundamentally, we were one body engaging another body with the intent of making a positive difference in their life. Whatever the story was in the middle of that, that's what we were. We had that we shared, and we had a lot of other shared foundation. We had discovered, we agreed on a certain body of knowledge that we all needed to have. Well, that was a shared foundation. We had a lot of that. You guys have a much simpler shared foundation. It all started with two people, Joseph and Clara Pilates. And every variation you have on the theme comes off of that center. So your secrets are not so darn secret. They're just your creative expression of a pretty powerful thing. Your personalized version of this shared foundation. So get over yourselves with your secrets. Anyway, what we also discovered as we dared to share is we discovered that we could identify best practices. We could see that somebody did something that was a really cool development of something we were trying to do, but boy, that was a cool way to do it. And we could compare these things and kind of come up with our own version of a more wise solution to a shared concern. So best practices was a really wonderful reward for having dared to share. We also found that it made us all better. We all got better by sharing because we all learned something from each other, and even if we didn't take it on just how you did it, we took it on as a stimulus, as a sense of inspiration. Even the policies and the procedures and the rules and the standards and all that stuff that we created as we decided that we needed some of those things, they weren't about control. They were really about getting grounded and in what we shared and empowering us to be creative, to be innovative, to take the next step, to see what can we do with this piece that we've got right now. And we really actually became more creative in the end of it. And it made every one of our programs better because we got that stimulus. So fearing to share is an unfortunate and unnecessary element that we often bring to these kinds of things, and it's not needed. Okay, so I'm back to this statement that I said before. I love that image. Whoever found it, you're brilliant. Anyway, educators are the leaders. We are the thought leaders. We are the innovators. We are we prepare the next wave of teachers, of practitioners. We are the ones that say the next cutting edge of wisdom involves blah, blah, blah. And you start putting in these new ideas, and then the people you teach take those new ideas out to the public. Now those become standard. Now you got the next wave of new ideas. So you are teaching the next wave of people taking it to the front line, and the next wave of teachers who are going to teach those people who are taking it to the front line. That's a very powerful thing, because what you end up doing is you help shape and evolve the field that you're in. Pilates has got a lot of room to grow and a lot of places to go. So you got to take your wisdom and your inspiration and your creativity and your innovation and put it into play. It's a very important thing. So you've got things that really make a difference in your world. You've got the Pilates Method Alliance that has goals relative to putting people out there. One of those is to promote standards for teachers in schools. I mean, that's really a big thing. The PMA is really strongly committed to that. And what that does is whatever kind of outreach they do, whatever kind of social media exposure they make, or position papers that are put out there, or whatever kind of marketing and PR kind of things that come out of the PMA, they're meant to be to communicate to the consumer, the ultimate consumer, the public, about that there are standards for teachers. Now, I don't know how well that's communicated yet to the general public, but the more that the general public knows that there's such a thing as a certified Pilates teacher, that's a standard. So you may find with time, as that becomes more common knowledge, that people will call your studio and say, are your teachers certified? Because that will become a valued standard. At some point, I don't know that that's how much that exists today, but at some point it will be. The more the public is exposed, the more the public will request. Then there's also this, the PMA highly promotes the standards that have come to be known as the PSAP. So that one is to promote that to the consumers of that. That means the people who want to study to become teachers. And the same thing, once there is a known standard, people are going to start asking. Just like I heard one school owner say, well, I got my school licensed, and some people will come to me because that is a standard that makes me stand out from the rest, and they appreciate my being licensed. Well, the same thing with the PSAP. At some point, there's a tipping point, which is not yet, But as more of the consumer public knows about standards for schools, that's going to become a marketing potential for your studios. All of my teachers are certified teachers. All of my teachers went to a certified school, whatever. You get to use that information in distinguishing you from whoever else is in your world. And even if 3 schools in your area all have certified teachers and all those went to PSAP schools, that just makes the 3 of you look good. Now you just have to distinguish what makes each of you different from the other. But that's okay. And so the PMA is really committed to that, and that's a good thing. Now, you have got the Summit Development Committee. Now, the Summit Development Committee, besides its purpose, which is to promote the standards for schools and get the consumers to know about it, I mean, obviously that that group is highly committed to that goal. Their job is to raise the consciousness of everybody, so you get to really know that it's out there and be there with that. This is where educators interacting with each other, cooperating with each other, allows you to identify the challenges that you all share. I mean, what happens to one place, school is most likely also faced by the other schools. So these are the challenges that affect everybody. You share and coordinate about that and cooperate with each other about that, everybody's going to be improved. Because you're going to look at what is it that we can do. And somebody's going to have an idea and somebody else is going to play off that idea, and you guys collectively will create solutions that really serve your group. So you want to promote the cooperation among educators, encourage others to participate. So you here, or however many people are represented here in this room, 40, 50 people, you all know other people who are doing what you're doing. Encourage them to get involved. Let them know this exists. Let them know there's a value and a standard. Let's encourage them to participate. And if they're not willing to participate, at least inform them. So at least they know. Because there's a lot of people, I'm sure, in your field that don't yet know that there is a PMA and don't yet know that there's a PSAP. Because they live in their little isolated world of just whatever they've created, and they don't look at beyond themselves. So you want to encourage that. I want to point out again that the SDC, the Summit Development Committee, is a self-selected committee of interested, committed educators who are, by their own self-selection, representing all of you and representing your needs and your concerns. But they're just very casually getting input from you. There's not a unified formal setting for them to really be bouncing off these ideas and have everybody collectivized around them. So there is a position that where you are really getting this process going, and the accreditation may be a goal for you guys. I'm not sure if that's what you want to do, but I do encourage you actually to consider that because you're very close to it. But the potential development of going into that accreditation process is in your presence. It's in your current reality, and the PSAP really plays a very, very big role in that. So you all have to start with that, I suppose, but you need to move to the next step if you care to. There is also, for those of you who have been through the PSAP or licensing, I'm sure you've all recognized what it has done for your school. This institutional refinement. As you went through to create your lesson plans or to create your catalog or to create your enrollment agreement or any of those things, you probably had to go into some of your fundamental structure and go, I need to tweak that a little bit. I need to fix that up a little bit. Oh, I need to invent one of those. I don't even have one of those, And so you have to create things that help you to fit into that. And the end result is a much more refined school. You have got a school that you are more confident in the framework that you've created in that. But I really want to encourage you guys to be getting very much to be a part. I want you guys to really start talking to each other about formalizing your council of schools. It will make a big difference, and it's important because most of you are small schools. And when I started with the council schools, most of us were small schools. But as we emerged, there was some corporate school systems that came in, and as massage is not as easy to put in place it's easier to put in place than Pilates, because with Pilates you need machinery. Massage, you can throw up a couple of tables, throw in a person, you got a school. So you had a lot of med tech schools that said, let's put in a massage program, and they just, a little bit of investment and find some person who was living and breathing and said they knew massage and put them in the thing there and let them teach it. There weren't all standards for teachers either. But at the beginning there, it was just, it was easy to put on. So community colleges did it, and med tech schools did it, and there was this wave of schools that opened up everywhere. At the height, I think there was about 1,500, 2,000 schools, something like that in the country. And I think it's down to about 1,200 because a lot of these med tech schools and community colleges, after the wave went by, they just said, oh, well, we're not that committed. And they dropped their programs, thank God. Because some of them are good, I don't want to say that, but there was a movement. And so you got to realize that the small schools would start to feel the impact. But if the small schools stand up and put their voice into the game now, everything that's evolving and developing includes your concerns. It includes your needs. So the small schools need to be involved in this. You need to bring your voice to the story. And you need to be part of whatever legislation is happening around, when you're talking about licensing. Licensing is I have to tell you, but you all are vocational schools. If you're teaching somebody to do something that they're expecting to go out to make a living on, and you're taking money for that, you're a vocational school. So if you don't think that, get over that, because you are. And as we've discovered, every state just about requires you to be vocationally licensed. Now, you may be under the radar and may be noticing that you exist yet, but step out of the shadows and go through the process and get yourself known and get yourself on the radar. Make a statement for Pilates as a profession. I'm hearing so many things about what you guys are doing, very specialized, very organized subsets of doing Pilates. It's not just, here's a machine and here's the form that Joseph said to use. You're applying these things in really creative and wonderful, useful ways. I'm hearing about prenatal and shoulders and, orthopedic and recovery from different things. Those are great. But if you don't have standards, you're going to run into what the states consider a danger to the public. At which point they're going to have a whole lot more what to say about what you do, how you do, when you do. So you might as well be on the front line and make it happen, and make it be in the view that you want. You really do want the small schools to be there, so don't let that be an excuse. Step in, do it. Your voice is needed. You need to keep it strong. So what I want to do is take one quick little look at just where you are. Review of those 6 benchmarks of a mature profession. You're actually in pretty good shape. So, an independent council schools, well, you've got the beginnings of that. That's your Summit Development Committee. That is that self-selected group. And so you're kind of in the beginnings of that. Research Center, you're at the beginnings of that too. You've got a research committee that's looking at and seeing but at some point you may want to formalize and gather funds and be able to give grants yourself for people to go out there and start studies. And at this level, in all honesty, what you're doing is pilot studies, which really helps people even begin to see there's value. Because once you have a pilot study that's shown positivity, then you go to a larger a funding source to kind of do a bigger study. But the small studies are important because you can't get the bigger stuff until you've shown smaller things that work. So that may be something that goes. Third-party certification, you actually have that. That's a good one. You're in place with that one. Accrediting commission, not so much, but you're on your way. You're 2/3 to 3/4 of the way there with your PSAP. And organization of regulatory bodies, I'm not sure when that'll kick in, because that's usually, your regulatory bodies right now would be the licensing boards of the states. But this usually reflects a regulatory body of the practitioners within the field, and you don't necessarily have that existing anywhere for you guys. So that may happen long in the future, but let's not talk about that quite yet. But what this says is that of these 6 criteria, you have 2 of them done. And you've got 2 more of them, or 3 more of them, almost done. So you are pretty far along. So as an evolving profession, you're at some very elemental places in some arenas and some pretty progressed places in others. And I really want to encourage you guys to do it. Stay committed to the excellence that you want to see in your field, because you're addressing 5 of the 6 things are either done or in process to be done. So stay committed to this and create standards, and be standard bearing. And I'll leave you with just one famous line: go forth and prosper.